All right, Stefan, gracias.
Well, thank you. How are
Dankeschön.
you?
Dankeschön for accepting the invitation to join us in the MundoBSO Café. I
Oh,
have
my
a
honor.
deep admiration for you, you know that. It's the first time, es la primera vez que nos vemos, nunca habíamos hablado así, en fin, en vivo. It's the first time we meet each other through on live. All right.
Yes, well, I was looking forward to hopefully seeing you at some sort of festival either last year or this
Yeah,
year.
yeah,
I
I
don't
know,
know what happened.
I know. But anyway, this is I want. I wish this will be the first of many, what's the word? Reunions with you and with other MundoBSO people. There is some fellows of MundoBSO who has asked me if they can share us in the conversation to ask you something or whatever. So
Sure.
I have opened the door and maybe they join us or not, or they are watching us now. Stefan, I want first my first this book is a milestone. It's a
Well,
milestone. Wait, shut up. This book is a milestone. All right. It's a milestone because of its bravery, its honesty, its good writing, and because you explain very painful things with elegance, without bitterness, without toxicity. Toxicity. So, why did you choose? Why did you choose this subject? You could have written a book about what the wonderful John Williams or the wonderful whatever, but you choose to get into the dark side of the film music industry to show the most disagreeable aspect of film music. I mean, this is not. I guess this is not comfortable to write this kind of books. And how did you how did it come that you elected this subject?
I mean, the goal was not to write an uncomfortable book about film music. And in fact, you know, I'm glad that you say that I write about the toxicity of the industry without bitterness, because I mean that was the goal. You know, whenever I write something, whether it's an essay, a review, or a book, the goal is always to investigate something. So in a way, it's a very egoistic endeavor that I undertake when I write something, because essentially it's all about me, wanting to find out about something. You know, an area attracts my interest, and I get curious. I want to find out more about it. I want to find out what's really going on. So then I start researching, and then I start writing to collect my thoughts and gather all sorts of data and information. And the same thing with this book. I, you know, hadn't planned to write something about the dark side of the industry or anything like that. I mean, as you probably know, I was editor-in-chief of a European film music magazine, Cinema Musica, for many years. And I started writing for it when I was 16 or 17 and finished in 2016. So I did it for about 10 years or more. And I essentially finished or quit because I thought I had said everything there was to say about film music, everything I wanted to say. There was nothing left for me to say. I'd interviewed lots of people, I'd written reviews, I've written articles and essays about all sorts of things to do with film music, and I was getting tired of it. There was nothing more to add, I felt. But what then happened is that, of course, when you interview people, and sometimes you interview them multiple times over the years, you stay in touch, and sometimes you become friendly with them. And I was speaking with composers after I, you know, finished working for Cinema Musica, the magazine, and you know, they, obviously off the record, they kept complaining. Not so much complaining, but they said they would drop some things, some hints that indicated they were not really happy with their job. And I think what gave me the idea, and I didn't know whether it would become a book or not, but the initial idea came through Joe Kramer, because I was living in London back then. I recently moved back to Germany. But in 2016, a friend of mine from Los Angeles was in London, and he texted me one night and said, "Oh, I happen to be in London. Do you want to meet up for dinner?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. There's a great Indian restaurant around the corner from where I live. Let's go there." And he said, "Okay, I'll bring Joe Kramer along. Do you mind?" And I said, "No, it's perfectly fine." I'd never met Joe, but I was happy to have dinner with him. So the three of us went for dinner, and we had a very informal conversation. And Joe said some things that corresponded with what a few other composers like Michael Danner had said to me. Michael Danner was the last person I interviewed for Cinema Musica. And he just recently had complained about some things, and I thought that was interesting. So we had a lovely, lovely dinner, and I loved Joe. We had a great rapport and a great chemistry. And I then went back home, and after dinner, back then I was still smoking. I quit smoking since. But after dinner, I was standing on the terrace of my flat, and I was having a cigarette. And as you probably remember, when you smoke, you get these 5 minutes of peace and quiet, and you can think, and you think about all sorts of things. And I thought, why is it that all these composers keep complaining? I mean, objectively, they have a great job. It's, well paid. They can be creative. They can do what they love. Why do all these people, say so many negative things off the record? And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to investigate it? Because I started to see a pattern. They were complaining about similar things. And I just finished working for Cinema Musica, and I was kind of fed up with film music after all these years. But the next morning I woke up and I took a piece of paper and I made some notes about, well, these kind of issues would be interesting to explore. And I then thought about, well, how do I go about it? And I didn't know whether it would become a book or not, but they were simply some issues that I personally was interested in. For example, the Hans Zimmer phenomenon. How has it influenced, if at all, the film music industry in the past few years? And then ghostwriting and Cutting Edge had been mentioned, the company which essentially buys publishing, and later on, I think also bought, obviously owned master rights and sometimes even the writer's share, which previously was unheard of. And I thought, well, these are all interesting subjects. So how do I go about it? In London, we had this amazing, we still have this amazing library as part of the British Film Institute, which is called the Rubin Library. And they have, every book on film that was ever written. And I would go in there several times a week and just grab some books and read them and make notes. And Fred Karlin's book on film music was amazing. Tony Thomas' book on film music was amazing. And that gave me an idea about the background of film music and some things that I hadn't known before, because it was clear to me that I would also need to give some sort of history of film music in order to understand and evaluate the present situation that we're in. So I did that, and that gave me a foundation, and we went from there. And as you can imagine, the book changed. It became clear very early on it would become a book. It was too much to just publish as an article. So, okay, it was going to be a book, and then how do you structure it? That changed from its very inception until the time when I submitted it for publication. There were some issues that I had planned to write about that I didn't write about, that I had to cut or delete, and other subjects came in as replacements. So it was a very fluid process, but that's essentially how it came about.
There are three kinds of composers. Speaking about complaining, the composer who complains and do nothing, he or she likes to complain. He lives by complaining. The composers that complains and takes action, and the composers that do not complain at all.
Like in life, yes.
Yeah. They complain. This is what I have. But I have a lot of stories of Spanish composers that I must take them to the grave because I gave my word. But you achieve to let these composers to talk to you and to let you write about complainings that publicly, I mean, they couldn't write about this in Facebook or whatever. I mean, they take some risk by telling some things, some subjects here. I remember, I don't remember if you mentioned this in the book. I remember some years ago, few years ago, a composer, an American composer, wrote a complaining in Facebook. And in a couple of hours, he removed it, he deleted it, because he was advised, if you are going to, you are caving your own grave. So somehow you have achieved not only the recollection of information, but somehow you have achieved to share confidence to these composers, to let them write about the fears or their anguish or their frustrations or their anger. No.
Yes, and I don't know why. I don't know what it is about them or about me that makes them trust me so much. I mean, I think I'm a trustworthy person. I didn't threaten them with violence if they didn't tell me their stories. I don't know why they did, but in fact, there wasn't a single, I mean, there was one composer, and I think I mentioned this to you privately, who I approached and I said, would you like to take part in my book? And this composer said, well, what's your book about and what would you like to talk about with me? And I said, well, it's about, you know, the issues that the industry is facing, and I would like to speak with you about some issues such as ghostwriting. And he said, well, that sounds a bit controversial, I'd rather not take part. He was the only one, and every other composer I approached was happy to speak with me. And I met with some over breakfast in London, over lunch or dinner, or on Skype. We talked, and you know, there wasn't any problem. They very freely spoke about the things that were bothering them. Well, I didn't need to prompt them. Maybe I have that special quality that makes them trust me immediately. I don't know why. But there's a funny story. When I submitted my book for publication, I gave it to, I only sent it to 5 or 6 publishers, which wasn't much, but one company I sent it to was kind of an academic arm of Bloomsbury, which is a very famous publishing house, especially in the UK. And I sent them a proposal, which is like a 30-page summary of the book, including 2 sample chapters. And I laid out what the book was about, and I gave an overview of the various chapters. So I wrote, you know, chapter XYZ is about ghostwriting, and then the next chapter is about Hans Zimmer, and this is what I'm going to explore in that. And the book was finished by that point. I'd included 2 sample chapters, the book was done. And the editor at Bloomsbury looked at my proposal, and this lovely woman, she said, oh, that sounds really interesting. I'm very interested in it. And what we have to do, because we are an academic publisher, is we have to give it to peer reviewers, so to outside professors, teaching at university or whoever, to evaluate your proposal, to see whether it's trustworthy, whether we damage our reputation if we publish it or not. And I said, fine. And they said, usually we give it to 2 or 3 peer reviewers so that it's even and it's fair. And I said, fine, you know, you do that. And they sent it to 1 peer reviewer. And I presume it was a man teaching somewhere at university, but I don't know, because obviously everything is anonymous. And he gave his evaluation, a 2-page text. And he said, among others, he said, well, this author, who I'd never heard of, this Stephan Eicke, he can never write about ghostwriting. Nobody is ever willing to speak with him about it. I don't know how he intends to do that, but it's completely unprofessional. It's completely impossible. He will never speak with anybody. And so this editor at Bloomsbury sent me that evaluation, and she said, well, based on this feedback, we cannot publish your book. I'm sorry, but it's too risky. And I said, well, wait a second. I mean, obviously I accept that feedback, but you know, I attached 2 sample chapters, one of which was the ghostwriting chapter. And I said, well, you can clearly see for yourself that I did manage to speak with these composers about ghostwriting. It's there. So how can he say that, you know, I will not manage to speak with any about it? And he was the only one they'd sent it to because they couldn't find anybody else who had any knowledge about film music. And Bloomsbury apologized, but they said, "That's all we can do. I'm sorry, but we wish you good luck in finding a different publisher."
Stephan, let me explain. I do write for 30 years in the most important film magazine in Spain, and in fact, in the good times, the most read in the whole Europe. Fotogramas. Some 5-6 years ago, I wrote an editorial for the most important page in the magazine, called that I entitled it "Buttons Up. This is a robbery." And where I explain it, because I have all the information from the composers, the robbery they were suffering from the editorials, TVs who take their authors' rights. If you want to work, you have to your benefits is for us. I will explain that for my audience in MundoBSO in Spanish later on in another article. What is this subject about? But you know that. You know what it's about. So the robbery. So I wrote an editorial called "Put Your Buttons Up. This is a robbery." And the magazine, who has supported me and always, told me, "Conrado, we cannot publish this because we live on the publicity, all right, it's impossible. We cannot. So I got some frustration about that. But all right, in MundoBSO I can write about that whatever I want because I have no pressure on that. But Stephan, and many composers, Spanish composers, of course, and even some foreigner, told me very delicate things, very secrets that I cannot share. I simply cannot share. They cannot talk about that because their job is on risk. But I really cannot tell the audience what is happening behind the score, behind the production, and in respect. And I have some deep throats. I have some people who tell this. All right. But it's very important what you have done. That you have opened the red light, the red light, no, the green light, to let people know about this side of the industry. So publishers that do not want to publish a so delicate matter subject, magazines or whatever. So this is a very when you are writing this book, you are compromising also the composers. So it's somehow. Did you have any kind of doubts about that?
No, not at all. I wasn't thinking in those terms. The goal was not to compromise anybody or you take the clothes from anybody. If I would have never written anything like that, and if I had thought that when I read my own book, when I proofread it, I would have never published it. Everybody that I spoke to shared the information freely. And sometimes I didn't ask them direct questions. I didn't say, "Well, tell me about if you use a ghostwriter on that."
Stephan, of course, I understand. My question was very badly said. No, after the publishing of the book, do you fear that some composers can be damaged by what they have told?
No. Let's be humble and just realistic. Nobody's going to read that book. Some composers have read it and are reading it, but nobody in the editorial departments of television or no producers in Hollywood are going to read that book. They're just not interested. They have other things on their minds.
Well, hope they don't read.
I mean,
No,
if they do, that's great. I encourage
yeah,
everybody to read my book, but
no,
I
you
think
know
it's very, very unlikely.
one of the worst experiences that I have passed through is that with the best intention, and with the green light by the composer or some composer, I wrote about something, something very delicate, something very, I mean, and in 2 days, 2 days after I wrote about this in MundoBSO, I was begged by the composer, remove that, because people is getting so much anger with me, and it is not my responsibility of the wrong thing that has happened, but I am the one to be blamed. I mean, if in films, for example, if anything goes right, you have to thank the director or the producer or whoever. Whatever happens wrong, it's the fault of the composer in this case. So you have to be very very delicate with this.
But yes, but that's, I mean, that's a whole other conversation, because also you're kind of talking about just the judicial situation. I mean, if you write anything that insults somebody, somebody might sue you for libel. So you have to be, I mean, when I was writing the chapter about Hans Zimmer, I was very conscious of the fact that there were things I could not write about. I mean, I could write them, but I certainly couldn't publish them, could put them in my drawer. So I was very conscious of that. I didn't, some things I didn't publish. I mean, I interviewed one composer who'd worked with Hans, who gave me a very open interview and told me how, the working environment was and the things he'd experienced. So I wrote everything down. It was part of the Hans Zimmer chapter. And prior to publication, I sent him the chapter. And he said, please, I withdraw sort of my comments. Please don't publish that, because I will never work in film and television again if you publish that. And because he was a close friend of mine, I said, well, I don't like to do this, but of course I respect and accept your judgment, and I will not publish it.
No, of course, but what I meant was, for example, a clear example. I have seen a film and I see a complete mess and a complete disaster. Some composers, when everything is wonderful, when the score is working very well in the film, when everything is going fine, and Conrado writes a wonderful review, and Stephan writes a wonderful review. All right, I am very happy. I am the protagonist. Thank you very much. But when something goes wrong and the score is bad, it doesn't work. It is erratic or whatever. It is not my fault. It's the director who have anyway. This is real, and this is logical, because who commands is the director or the producer or the editor or whoever. But in the specific case that I was talking to you, it was not about bad words or I mean, for example, the bad use of the existing music that destroy all the dramatic arc or the narrative of the music. So you have to say this is a very good music, but this is a very bad film music, because for whatever reason it doesn't work, where it should be explaining something, it is confusion, whatever. So I write about that. Oh, Conrado, you are right. You are totally right, but it is not my fault. It's the director, and I battle with him, because but I couldn't. I lost the battle. All right, that's fine. I will write, and I will ask for the hanging and for the burning of the director. This is a very bad film score, and the director hasn't know how to do it. In these cases, even if I am totally right, even if the composer says you are totally right, in these cases, I only met one director who told me, Conrado, you are right, I was wrong. But in the rest of the cases, oh, it's not my fault, it's the fault of the composer. But motherfucker, it was you who decided to destroy the narrative of the music or the dramatic of the music or whatever by putting that existing music or whatever. So this is what I was telling you, that if everything goes right, the director is the one to praise. But if something goes wrong, the composer is the one to be damned. And that's why I do think that many composers are very reluctant, very shy to speak about what is really happening with the process of the writing.
Yes, not in my experience. I mean, what you're saying is completely true. I mean, the composers are always to blame if something goes wrong. A good example is when we talk about rejected scores, for example. A score is often rejected not because the music is bad, but because the film is bad. Producers and directors desperately try to save the film. And if the film isn't working with the music that was written, then the composer gets fired and a new score is commissioned. I mean, that's in addition to what you were saying. I think that's a good example. But as I said, everybody I talked to spoke freely about their issues, and some of them said when something was their fault. So everybody was very honest about it, and it might be that I have a natural instinct about who to approach and who I interviewed and who I wanted to interview, the people I was interested in.
What I and let's end with this part of the talk. What I do beg and I do expect that this is not the end, but the beginning. I mean, I mean that from now on, composers share their thoughts or their experiences, be them good or bad, because they will help to respect the entity or the dignity of the profession of the film composing. But wait. But are you pessimistic? Are you optimistic about what is going to be the future of the position of the film composer inside the industry?
I don't know. I'm neither pessimistic nor optimistic. I mean, there are several things to be said about that. First of all, the situation in not just in Hollywood, but in film and television anywhere is so precarious and difficult at the moment because of the cinemas shutting down and the global situation that we're in, that I have no idea how that is going to affect movies and television. So that's one thing why I don't want to predict anything. And the other reason is that I'm not following film music that closely anymore, because when I finished writing this book, film music was maybe finally, hopefully finally, a closed chapter for me. I could, finally say, okay, I've now really I've said everything about film music I wanted to say, and there's nothing left that interests me. So I don't follow film music very closely anymore. I have to say I'm not up to date regarding the developments, and taking into account the situation that we're in, and the financial repercussions of coronavirus, and just society changing. I mean, how is that going to affect the movie making business? I simply don't know.
I do really think this it is it is mandatory to have an education from youngers to educate them to respect the composer, to respect music, to understand what is music. You have told in this book about how the many people with power in the industry considers music. They consider music as nothing, as nothing. I mean, my son's friend has a band in their house, and they can make a score. I mean, it's crazy. But you know what? I will tell you an experience I had 1 week ago. 1 week ago, Stephan. 1 week ago. I think that you saw it in Facebook. a small school inside Spain organized the teenagers organized an exposition for the school
Yes, I saw
of
that.
music.
Yes, and
All right.
congratulations for the
Yeah,
exposure.
wait. All right, yes, that's great. I mean, maybe 50 or 60 teenagers have worked. Obviously they did not know nothing who was Miklos Rozsa, who was Jerry Goldsmith, of course, but they studied them. They work in them, and they, I mean, education. And from you know, if this happens in many other schools, because film music is something that affects every audience. Uh, uh, People will get more sensibilized. You understand? More. I mean, you grow with the knowledge that music is not just music. It's a film construction. It's a, well, you know what I'm talking about. Oh, all right. So I was very happy. I shared it in the Facebook. You were very happy. Many people were very happy, and I thought there is a Facebook page, a Facebook group called, I don't remember the name now, American one, with crowded 20,000 people inside or whatever. Film music, I don't remember the name. All right, but where everyone complains. Because many composers like living complaining, not taking action, but complaining. Many composers complains because they have nothing, and even because they are nothing. So if you want to be listened, complain. So I published these photographs in this group of Facebook, American Facebook. Film music, perspective, or whatever. I publish it with the hope that well, there is hope. I mean, one of the solutions for your problems is to educate people, to educate the future directors, the future producers, whatever. Education is the solution for whatever subject in the world, of course, but also in film music. So it is a good that in a small small school in Spain, some teenagers had. I said, what if in California, in New York, in Wyoming, in Mexico? So they deleted the post. The administrator deleted the post because it was irrelevant. Because this and threatened me to block me if I again publish something so irrelevant, so future, so with no importance. I quit. Of course, I quit the group. I mean, I don't fit here.
But it says more about the group
Yeah,
than it does about you.
I mean, I'm not. Of course. I mean, I left. I mean, all right. Keep complaining. Keep complaining. I mean, education is the solution. Education is a solution, not only on childs or on teenagers, but inside the industry. I mean, in the UCLA, in the University of California, Bruce Broughton, Richard Bellis will talk. They don't teach about film music. In Spain,
yes, I mean the quintessential question, of course, is how do you educate people? I mean, I'm no fan of the current education system, whether we talk about Germany, UK, the US, or Spain, because I think the education system as it is essentially rubbish. And you know, there are some of the most interesting film scores of the past 15 years that have been written, you know, have been written by people from outside the film music system. And Mika Levy, Justin Hurwitz, they didn't study film music. That allowed them to, you know, do something completely strange, and something that allowed them to experiment, because they, you know, weren't aware of any rules, and they didn't accept any standards or any rules that they were taught at universities. And I think that can be a great thing, this learning by doing, and just doing what either the film demands or, you picked up in other means. But of course, the music has to respond to the film, and I think a great intuition is, you know, the key to that. Either you understand film or art, or you don't.
No, no. I mean, this is for another day, another conversation about composers who write music for films, or composers who are filmmakers. I mean, who propose solutions, so who give solutions. I mean, for example, Nino Rota didn't know nothing about film narrative, nothing about film. He was asked for music, and the directors Visconti, Fellini, Coppola used their music for in dramatic purposes, and wonderfully. But he was not a filmmaker, Nino Rota. He was a composer. And other composers, on the contrary, are filmmakers. I mean, they know how to deal with the narrative needs of the film. You know that. So if a composer that knows nothing about films, but has the good luck of having a director that do not do know about making how to transform music into a film narrative, is wonderful. The problem is if the composer does know nothing, and neither the director,
Yes.
and it's fine. And that's why I think it's so important. It's what I do at the university, and even from MundoBSO, to educate the filmmakers to understand that music is far more than only music. That they cannot use and deal the music only in emotional terms, but on dramatic and narrative terms. And that's why I do think that this is part of the education, because if the directors, because they are not taught in the UCLA or whoever or wherever, and the people that think that music is just only music, there will be no solution. I mean, they will be just using music as a tool to patch their own mistakes, and they will mistreat composers. So education is the key, and I think that education plus information is what is. I mean, I am not neither as you pessimistic or optimistic, but I strongly believe in that education is the key, and knowledge is the key to make the composers living better, and that's our fight. You have told me that you are quitting film music. Explain me that.
Well, in the sense that I don't intend to write any more books about film music, any more books like The Struggle Behind the Soundtrack.
But you're writing one now.
Oh yeah, I finished the second book, and I'm currently writing my third book, but none of them have to do with film music.
Directly.
And the third one kind of has to do with film music, but in a very different way, whereas the second book that's finished, is being proofread now, has nothing to do with film music whatsoever. I mean, it's something completely different. It's a different approach, it's a different subject, everything is different.
So you're quitting the crusade.
No, I never felt I was on a crusade. I felt I educated myself enough about the current state of the industry now, and that chapter is closed. I mean, I was worried when you before our talk, because I finished writing that book so many years ago. I think I finished it in 2018 or so, and it's so far back in my rearview mirror. I don't remember anything about it. I had to reread some of the chapters today just to prepare myself for any questions you might ask.
No. It happens to me that it happens to me in MundoBSO that many I am writing a review, and suddenly when I publish it, the website tells me this is already published. This film score is already published. Because the brain. Stefan, what about Caldera Records?
Well, that's still going.
So
I keep doing that.
so you are not quitting film music.
No, I keep doing Caldera, but you know, that's such a small niche. I mean, I don't need to research the film music industry for that. I know the kind of things that I like. I have always ideas in my head for scores that I would like to put out, and composers sometimes approach me. So that's that's a different thing. That's basically that takes care of itself. I have to do very little to keep Caldera running. It's not really any work.
You know, Stefan, I have 56 years now, and I am still discovering things when I inside the films inside. I mean, what happens, all what happens from the moment when the composer starts writing until the music is inside the film. I mean, it doesn't go with me because it's too much. And to me, the most important thing is the result. I mean, not how do you have arrived to that result, but the result. I mean, what it's in the movie, and exploring movies and seeing movies, a lot of a lot of films. I still discovering very interesting dramatic or narrative things in film music. So but that's
Oh
why.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I keep obviously I'm a passionate film watcher. I still watch films religiously, and I discover both films that I didn't know before and film scores that I didn't know before that you know attract me, that I find interesting, and that I weren't familiar with before. So of course, but that's a natural thing. What I meant when I said I'm not doing film music anymore is I don't write any books about film music anymore, any articles or essays. But there are still things that pop up. And you know, maybe at some point something happens that makes me say, oh, I need to write another book about film music. You never say never, who knows? But I'm not as film music is not as ingrained in my everyday life and thinking as it used to be.
So you have left. Stefan, how did film music appeared in your life? Film music.
Well, that's a good. I grew up in a small town in the country, essentially in the German countryside, and there wasn't.
In which part of Germany?
It was sort of north of the middle in Lower Saxony. And there wasn't anything to do. I mean, you really had to entertain yourself. But fortunately, we had a television set. So what I would do is I would watch a lot of television, and I would watch and record lots of films that were completely inappropriate for a young boy of 6 or 7 years of age. I mean, I would record crime films and thrillers and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, at some point, I don't know how old I was, but I started noticing the music in those films, these really catchy tunes. And they were mostly European productions, German films, Italian films, French films. I mean, that's how I discovered Philippe Sard. He was one of the first ones who I fell in love with. And Ennio Morricone, obviously. My father had a CD of Once Upon a Time in the West. It was beautiful. I stole that CD from his cupboard, and one evening before going to bed, I put it on, and I was lying in my bed and I was listening to Once Upon a Time in the West, and I was scared as shit with that guitar sounds. But it was beautiful. I became obsessed with that music because it made me dream. I hated that music because it made me afraid so much, but I loved it at the same time because there was something about it that I hadn't heard before, and that really interested me. And that's been sort of a continuous development in my life. I still look for things that I'd never heard before, I've never seen before, things that are sort of extraordinary, things that are unusual. It's just part of me that I always seek for those kinds of things, and those kinds of things really speak to me.
You know, in my next life, in my next life, I have to I want to devote myself to the study of the dramatic and narrative use of sound in
Yes.
film? Sound. I mean, through music, through film music. You know that to me, film music is cinema. I mean, it's not just music. It transforms like that Cinderella transform because this is a matter of chemistry. I mean, the music is a chemical and the rest of the film is another. And when they join, they produce a third element, different element. So film music is a matter of chemistry. It's a matter of chess. Any Morricone, I will confess you something that made me almost cry of joy. I have always, I don't know why, but I have always related film music to chess, to the movement of pieces with rational. I mean, not with emotional, but with rational. This piece here will make this effect in the film narratively or dramatically. All right, chess, and all Spanish composers have this talking about chess play in the film music. And then come the more, I don't have here the wonderful.
Yes, I read the book. It's wonderful.
The Morricone,
yes.
no. The one I read the Morricone book. The last Morricone book of the Conversations with Alessandro.
Yes.
Yeah, the first chapter, Morricone speaks of chess.
Yes.
And I thought,
he talks about chess for 50 pages or so.
Yeah, and I thought, that is it. This is it. This is exactly the connection with Morricone. Chess. So chemistry, chess, and of course architecture. Architecture as a structure. And through my investigation, through my discoveries, and because I know nothing, the more I learn, the more I have. There are things left to be learned about. And I have from some years. I think we must relate music with sound. The use of sound in films is something very fascinating.
It is. I mean, I'm currently revisiting for the third time Twin Peaks: The Return by David Lynch, which is fascinating in how it plays with sound, and that teaches you a lot just by listening very closely.
In The Elephant Man.
Sorry?
In The Elephant Man also.
In The Elephant Man also. Yes, I mean, all of David Lynch's films are fascinating in how unreal the sound design is and how it plays with your senses. In a similar way that I was recently watching a film you probably know. It's called Come and See by Ilya Klimov, which is it's a masterpiece of cinema, and it's one of the most astonishing, most immersive and intense films I've ever seen. And how sound is used is fascinating. And in fact, next month I'm going to give a class about it here in Germany, about how sound is used in Come and See specifically, because the sound design tells you what's going on in the main character's head. I mean, the main character is going insane, and we as the audience know what's going on and what he's thinking, not visually, but sonically, and how it plays with your senses is magnificent.
We must talk another day about sound. Stephan,
Yes.
promise me, because I am in the 0 point. I mean, I want to live 100 years and 150 years to learn about the use of sound, because I am discovering things that I didn't saw that before. And I through the music, I am watching how, as you have said, sound contributes and adds so much dramatic perspective and narrative perspective to the film. So the films is about sound, about music, about cinematography, about editing, also so important. So my next book, I don't know if now or in 3 years, because this is something I have inside, like an alien. I know it's growing and it will explode. I want to empirically demonstrate the strong relation, dramatically and narratively, between music and photography, music and sound, music and editing, music and acting.
Yes.
Of course, my last book was the music script. two scripts: the literal, the writing script and the musical script. All right, that's done. Now, music is also the second camera in the film, because music can focus in a general shot. It can focus to the specific point on the scene, the editing, the sound, whatever. So I have the impression, I'm not talking only about music. I have the impression that the ocean is yet to be discovered. The ocean is yet to be found. I mean, there are thousands of wonderful books about directors, about film techniques, but what about the use of sound? What about the editing? What about the relationship between sound and music? Whatever. This is crazy. We need 200 years of living.
Yes, I mean, there are many wonderful examples, and of course you need, sometimes it's difficult to find those films, because most of those films that use sound in a very intelligent and unusual way are not mainstream films, but are sometimes very obscure foreign productions from the Philippines or something like that. I was recently watching Pale Flower, which is a Japanese film with music by Takemitsu, which uses sound and music in the most fascinating way. But you have to find those films, and you will be pleased to know that for the book I'm currently writing, the third one, I'm quoting from your book, The Music, Script, and Film. So it's been very, very helpful. Thank you very much.
Stephan, please, come back to this conversation. Let's meet again soon, and with more people if they want to be with us, and let's talk more about films about from our perspective. That I think that is very, very interesting and deep. So, Stephan, thank you very much. Gracias. Thank you.
Well, thank you
for sharing this time with the MundoBSO people, and we will meet together again. All right. I do respect you. I do admire you, and I want to know about you, about whatever you do and whatever you
Same to you.
you
Thank
make.
you very
All
much.
right, Stephan. Thank you very much. We'll see soon. Gracias.
Yes. Be well.
Y nos vemos en la próxima café. Thank you, Stephan. Thank you very much.
Bye bye.